Hello, this is Daily Yap number 32 or 31, I think. And today I want to talk about something that I think is really relevant to people that work in the corporate world, which is the artificial urgency in the corporate world. So this is something that I lived myself. Not that long ago, I was working at a big airline company that's called LATAM Airlines. And in there, I remember that in a certain year, people were like really rushing and worried that we were not meeting the goals of the company, right? I'm not going to disclose the goals because, of course, that's private information. But it was like this big goal of like, hey, we have to make this amount of money. And I remember like everyone was like really worried about that because we were like, oh man, we're not reaching the goal. So like everyone knew, the managers were like really worried and trying to convey this worriness to the employees or the people under them, right? And I remember at one time somebody asked like, okay, but wait, where does this goal come from? And honestly, it was really something that was totally made up. The apartment where I was, sorry, apartment, I keep saying that, the department where I was in the company was like kind of new, so like a couple of years old. And in there, I remember like the first year, I wasn't there, but this is from what I was told. They had like this goal of like, hey, we have to make this amount of money. And, they did that, right? So that was great because we were like applying tech to basically get these low hanging fruits of like gains that the company could make. And then the next year it was double that because it made sense, right? But then the next year was also like double the previous amount. So it was like, okay, wait, so say, I don't actually remember the number, but say it was like, oh, the first year we need to make 100. And I was like, yeah, great, we did it. Then the next year was like 200. And then the next year was 400. And it really didn't make sense because anyone that has any logic in them knows that the exponential growth is not sustainable, right? It's not really realistic. Probably there's like a top, of like how much you can make. But usually, what the Pareto principle tells us is that to get that last 20% of gains, you need like 80% of the effort. And the other way, to get like the first 80% of the gains, you just need 20% of the effort. And that gave me like a really big insight because in the team where we were, it was like a really data driven team, right? It was the experimentation team. And there we would do experiments to actually know the actual gains of things, which of course it's something that's really useful. And once again, it's database, right? It's not like, oh, somebody make a calculation. It's like, yeah, sure, we made these gains. You need to like measure things in a realistic way. And was like a really small conversation in like one of the many meetings that we were having. But that's when I realized like how crazy that is. Like in corporations, which I believe is where most people work, there's this big sense of like urgencies, like, oh man, we're not reaching the goals, we're not reaching this. And in startups, which I've also worked, it makes a lot of sense because, if the company doesn't reach some goal, basically there's no investment and the company might go bankrupt. But in big corporations, these goals and these deadlines are like so arbitrary. Like literally, if you think about it, you as the employee, say the lowest ranking employee, have like this sense of urgency because your manager tells you. And your manager has that because his manager tells him to, right? But then you go all the way to the top and it's like, oh, do the higher ups, whatever it's like the board or like the CEO have this in mind because they actually like thought about it and were like, oh, this is something that's like realistic, we should be able to reach these numbers. And the answer is no. Like how crazy that is. Like the reason why everyone is rushing all the time or most of the time is not because somebody thought that we should reach this because it's important or it's meaningful, but really it's just because, like I said, an old guy with money wants to make more money, and to make that more money he passes that urgency to the CEO, and then the CEO to all the managers below, all the way to the lowest ranking employee. And that's so, and I'm missing like a word to convey what I want to say, but how unreasonable and like unsustainable and like completely illogical that is. It's like why, or like, how can you expect always do like double the amount of money? And that being said, to make a little bit more money each year, I think it's reasonable, right? Because you start getting better at all the processes that you make. You always can find like some optimizations. So I do think that it's reasonable that companies always want to make a little bit more, right? Maybe do a little tweak here, make this more optimized, and therefore have some gains. Like that's not really unrealistic, and I think it's a reason of why companies keep existing. They keep improving. At least that's what classical capitalism, not the new capitalism, which is basically profit at all cost, but what Adam Smith thought. It was like, the more value you add to society, the higher the return of investment. So that's good. But this expectation that so many people have about like exponential growth, it's like always like, oh, we need to do, on the first year we need to do 10x what we were making at the start of the year, and then the next year 10x that, and then 10x that, and it's like, dude, that's not really, like, honestly, that's not really realistic. It can be at a certain stage in some companies, right? Specifically for startups, right? Like it's not unreasonable to think that you grow by 100 times, in a couple of years, maybe even 1,000. But if all the companies eventually hit a ceiling, for example, Facebook, which I also work for, they were facing the problem that the pool of people available to actually get into Facebook was like running out. Maybe not, in the whole world, because there's probably like a lot of people in China, for example, that don't have Facebook, or like in India, right? But in countries like the US, Canada, like most people at one point had Facebook. So it wasn't reasonable to think like, oh, we need more and more users, because you're actually approaching the limits, like the whole universe of possible people that you reach. And that's this is one thing that I wish more people knew, because in the world right now there's a lot of like anxiety, right? And this is not something just from the how to say, newer generations, right? It's something that also affects the older generations. They're like, oh man, like I'm working so much, because we have the deadline and we need to reach this. And this is the thing, it's like how crazy it is that most people get convinced that this is something like important or like worth pursuing and like worth putting that extra mile to reach a goal that's completely arbitrary. And that's the thing, at the end of the day, what is that for? Just to make an old guy who already has a shit ton of money make more money. Like that's how boards work. When you go at the highest level of companies, people think that it's like, oh, the CEO is the guy that decides everything. And the CEO, the name Chief Executive Officer, is just the guy that executes things. But the ones that really call the shots, the ones that can actually remove the CEOs, are the board directors. And what are board directors? Are people with a lot of money, with a lot of stakes in these companies, so many stakes that they can actually sit at the board and make decisions. And, if they don't like a CEO, they can remove it. But at the end of the day, do you think that these people really think about like, oh, sustainability or like improvement for the workers? No, like honestly, at the highest level of all of these, people just want more money and they don't really matter the cost. So that's why sometimes CEOs come as these like evil, how to say, like relentless people, or like without morals. The reason why they are like that, it's because they, get their instructions, right, their goals from the board. And the board is just people that want to keep making more money at a rate that's like always increasing. Say, if a company makes, once again, like 100, they're not happy if the next year you make 110, which is a 10% increase, which in my opinion is pretty good. But they actually want to make, it's like, no, 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 that's too slow. I want to make 200 if possible. And then maybe you don't reach that goal, you maybe reach 180, because people really push themselves and they're like, oh, we didn't reach the goal, we just reached 180. Well, whatever, next year we're going to make 300. And it's like, man, like, yeah, I don't know. I feel like the younger generations are kind of like realizing this, right? That's why there's so many like articles about like quiet quitting and like do the very minimum at your job, because that's how things are. There's no reason for so many people to be so anxious about work when the goal of all that work, and the majority of the impact that people have and do is just going to the higher ups and they make more money. And like that's it, how empty and meaningless is that, right? Like it's crazy, man. It's crazy. And I feel like more people once again are realizing this, and that's why the work hustle culture is kind of like dying. And I think it's a good thing, honestly. Because if it was sustainable work, right? If people were actually like, okay, we do need to make more money, but at the same time we want to maybe improve salaries, maybe we want to do something that's sustainable, that could be great. But it's not that way, like that's the thing, and they might say that they care about sustainability, and this is once again something that I know that happens. They say like, oh, we have like all these pillars, and maybe they throw like sustainability or like environmental friendly, and then as soon as that goal is like how to say, opposed to another goal, it's always the one that's going to go last. Make money is always the ultimate goal. So yeah, I mean, there's not much insights about this, more than the whole urgency that a lot of people fear at work is completely manufactured and it's completely unreasonable. So if you're ever like, oh man, like we're not reaching the deadline, or like the goal for the yearly goal, that's so bad. Like don't worry about it, man. Like honestly, don't worry about it, because it really doesn't make sense, like how greedy these people are, so that they are willing to like push a company to that extent. At least if it was like something that's like ambitious but realistic, it could be more reasonable, right? But it's not. It's not even reasonable. It's just like, oh, let's make double, let's make double, let's make double. And if they say, if you reach the goal, then the next year it's not going to be like make double, it's probably going to be like double 0.5, right? Like 2.5 times, or like triple, because that's how it works. And once again, that's so unrealistic. I honestly, okay, if I have to like say something about this, is that if anyone watches this video and at any point in your life you are actually the manager or like the one building a company, keep that in mind. Like when you were having a bad time at work because you were like stressed and all of this, it was just because somebody put this unrealistic goal over everyone. So when it's your time to do it, like go against that. I'm currently making my own company, and I already have in mind, it's like, dude, I'm not going to expect like this kind of like constant exponential growth from people. Like if you're at a point where the company is stable, right? And by stable I mean like financially, like basically you make equal or more money than the money that you spent, dude, that's the point where you can actually decelerate, and say like, okay, we are going to keep growing, but not at a pace that it's like unsustainable. Because what happens, and this is a sad truth, is that you end up burning people. So for example, I was at Facebook, and in Facebook I remember seeing a statistic that said like 50% of the company has been for less than a year and a half. And that's crazy, like 50% of the people don't really have like that much experience in the company. And why is that? Because they burn people. It's such a high pace environment that they end up burning people. But sadly, that's a business model that works. And this also happened for another startup that I was in the US. Like almost nobody from the original team was already there, because the model is, let's bring someone new, pay them well, right? So you get like a good talent, burn them, make them work, super hard so that the company can grow. And at one point they're going to burn. But, instead of worrying about like, oh, we're losing employees, they're like, okay, then let's just switch for a new employee, and let's keep this like constantly high pace, high growth environment. And man, that's crazy. That's really inhumane, in my opinion, I'm not against, I guess, like high pace environments, but to think that it's just okay to burn through people for the sake of making more money, it's fucked up. Like, let's say it like that, it's fucked up, man. But once again, sadly, it's a strategy that works. That's why, Amazon is like that, Facebook is like that, so many startups are like that. But, it sucks, man. It sucks. And that's not something that I personally would like to perpetuate in the world. And I think that a lot of people are with me, Yeah, well, once again, something to think about. If you're ever in a position, where you are the manager, and you have this artificial urgency vested upon you, try to you be the filter and like the differentiate, you know, from the other people. Because honestly, is it worth working yourself, you know, to death just so that an old guy that already has a lot of money can make more money? I think not. Well, anyway, that has been Daily App number 30 something. I'll see you guys in another video. Bye.